Hello, welcome to Secure the Continent, News Central Television. I am Gbenga Aborowa. This is the show where we bring you up to speed with all the latest security happenings on the African continent. But before we delve into today's main focus and topic, let me first bring you the latest security headlines. 40 Al-Shabaab fighters killed in clashes in Somalia. In West Africa, Burkina Faso's interim leader Ibrahim Traoré confirms coup attempt. And the United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres hails Ethiopia-Tigray peace pact. And in Southern Africa, 30 suspected terrorists killed in northern Mozambique. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Today on Secure the Continent, our focus is on security situation in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The country is facing an insurgency by the M23 rebels, a Tutsi-led group which the Congolese government claims is supported by neighbouring Rwanda. At a summit in Luanda on Wednesday aimed at finding solutions to the East Congo crisis, the leaders of Congo, Rwanda, Burundi and Angola and former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta has declared a ceasefire which is aimed in particular at stopping attacks by the M23 rebel group.
The Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo has faced violence in recent times as M23 rebels continue to pose security tension. The once dominant group has risen from its ruins, taking up arms after it claimed the Congolese government failed to actualize a disarmament deal. With a ceasefire seen to be in place in the region in the last 5 days, questions have been asked as to the sustainability of this arrangement and how far it can go in helping bring peace to the region. It's dicey yet hopeful. The parties involved are enormous and there are risks of a ceasefire not bringing the results required by Congo DR. Although a much stronger East African regional force is waiting on the wings to pounce on the failure of the rebel group to act on its words, the end goal remains shrouded in doubts. History tells us ceasefires help to seize fire, but how far it goes in bringing peace remains mysterious. It is, however, a good first step towards the actualization of a more stable Eastern DRC, but all eyes must be on the warring parties. It's not all Uhuru yet, and a ceasefire is a step amongst many towards the achievement of recovery of a bustling region. With millions in great danger and hundreds dead, peace remains the most possible option. Yet, its possibility is there in Eastern DRC. Baby steps for giant strides, perhaps. Time will tell if a ceasefire can stop the raging inferno brewing in one of Africa's most troubled regions.
Now, joining us to discuss this in detail and more, we have Jordan Anderson, Senior Risk Analyst with S&P Global. He joins in from London in the United Kingdom. And during the course of the conversation, we expect Vava Tampa to join in also from London, the founder of Save the Group, and Chief Bisong Etahoben, a journalist, who will join in from Limbe in Cameroon. Thank you very much for joining us, Jordan, and welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Jordan, what's the genesis of this conflict in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo? Who are the M23 rebels and what do they want?
So the origin of the M23, we can go all the way back and we can discuss the M23 rebellion back of 2012 and 2013. And the key thing to understand here is that its core, this is essentially a breakaway part of the Congolese military that had previously been integrated into the military following a previous peace agreement, one signed on the 23rd of March a number of years ago, which it alleges the Congolese government broke that accord with them and did not live up to those terms. And so since then, we've seen M23 fighters and individuals, some of whom had been involved in previous armed rebellions against the Congolese government, continuing to be involved in further risings. There have been a number of allegations, including quite substantial allegations by the United Nations, by the United States, various European governments, that back around 2012, 2013, and also more recently, that we've seen the government of Rwanda providing assistance to M23, similarly historical allegations that the government of Uganda was providing them with support as well. At its very core, M23 is a group composed especially of Rwandophones, speakers of the Rwandan language from Eastern Congo, but Congolese Rwandophones, who again have felt discriminated against by the Congolese government, and like the Congolese government hasn't lived up to its assurances to them.
Now, Jordan, there's been a series of diplomatic moves in Luanda and Nairobi geared towards negotiating a ceasefire. How successful have these meetings been?
One of the primary impediments to the success of these and other meetings is the absence of M23 representation at them. We've seen a number of other groups from the region being represented, including the government of Rwanda, the government of DRC, amongst others. M23 themselves have not been directly invited to take part. M23 has often indicated and demanded negotiations with the Congolese government, but the Congolese government has stood firm that it will not negotiate with M23 until M23 withdraws from a number of areas that they've captured over the past couple of months. So as it stands, at points, M23 has, especially initially in response to the Luanda summit, it actually insisted that it wasn't bound or that the agreements signed up didn't apply to them. Now, M23 has subsequently changed its tack on this. But even with all the more recent negotiations, we still haven't seen M23 being represented. And again, the Congolese government is insisting that it withdraws and pulls back from its new positions before there can be any direct talks.
Now, Mapi, you mentioned the absence of M23 at the negotiations in Luanda and Nairobi. Do we expect the M23 to adhere to the ceasefire when they were not given any roles in these negotiations?
I would not expect that we are going to see the sides adhering to the ceasefire, especially as we move forward in the weeks coming from now. We've already seen renewed fighting between the M23 and the Congolese military since the ceasefire was signed. We've also seen other instances of fighting between M23 and other armed groups that are opposed to M23 and who at times have worked with the Congolese military. And what I think we're going to likely see is the M23 launching further offensives and engaging in new fighting, not so much towards Goma in the coming weeks, but especially when we're thinking further out within North Kivu. M23 are looking to put pressure on the Congolese government, looking to try to force them to negotiate, to come to the negotiating table with them. One of the strategies that they could try to use for this is to launch operations trying to capture areas of Masisi territory. Within North Kivu, potentially even trying to come all the way around and try to encircle the city of Goma from the west as well, trying to cut Goma off potentially from the roads that bring in key food supplies and other supplies into the city by land from elsewhere in Congo.
Now, Jordan, you did say the fighting, there was fighting and skirmishes between M23 and the Congolese federal troops. Now, what's the current situation of things in the eastern DRC? I do recall that for a few days there was relative calm. Has that been broken, and does it mean that there's no effective ceasefire as we speak?
So as of today, from what I understand, there's something of an uneasy ceasefire on the ground that is actually held for most of today, being Friday. Yesterday, we did see fighting again between the Congolese military and the M23 in the Kibirizi area. In North Kivu, not Kibirizi itself, but some of the areas around it. And so that was after about 5 days of ceasefire. And then further back towards the weekend, we saw, I think on the weekend, there were instances where there was at least one ambush that was carried out against the M23, again, by armed groups that are allied with the Congolese government, or at least also fighting against the M23. So there are. However, when we think about what is often considered the main front between M23 and the Congolese military, that's the National Road 2 going down towards Goma, that's an area where we continue to see less fighting since that ceasefire was declared. So while we have seen the ceasefire breaking down in some parts of North Kivu, it is holding in other parts. And in fact, from what I understand, for most of today that we've seen, we haven't seen major fighting. So it's more of intermittent fighting that we're seeing now rather than a complete breakdown of the ceasefire. But again, I believe that it's likely that we're going to see that ceasefire break down over the coming weeks, either as M23 tries to pressure the Congolese government to negotiating with them, or as the Congolese or allied forces decide they want to forcibly try to push M23 back to its previous positions. And
not a pretty situation, and it's just going to make things worse for the ordinary people on the ground. Thank you, Jordan. I'd like to bring in our second guest, Vava Tampa, the founder of Save the Congo Group. He joins in from London in the United Kingdom. A warm welcome to you, Vava, and thanks for joining us on the program. Now, Vava, the Democratic Republic of Congo's government has reiterated it will not offer amnesty to the M23 group, which continues to defy calls for cessation of hostilities and exit from the areas of Bunagana, Rutshuru, and Kiwanja, where they were last week asked to leave after the meeting in Luanda. What's your take on this, and is amnesty a workable option to ending the conflict?
Look, my view on these issues is quite clear. We have tried everything in the past. So we have tried amnesty, we have tried impunity, if we can call it that. They have not worked. M23, everyone understands, it's not a militia gangs or rebel movement fighting for Congolese interest. They are fighting for Kigali's interest. They are a private militia group of Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda. So there is no need for them to be granted any amnesty. Those responsible for the killings and displacement of the Congolese people should answer before a court of law. So my view is they ought to be held accountable. So to everyone thinking about the Congolese situation, those who have been following this situation from the start, they will tell you that from 1998, when M23 started as RCD Goma, to 2006 when they became or rebranded themselves as CNDP, and to 2012, 2010, 12, when they became M23, they have always been a Paul Kagame militia gangs killing Congolese people so that they can have access to Congolese natural resources. They should be brought to justice. So should also Paul Kagame himself.
Now, stay with you, Vava. The Rwandan government has repeatedly denied accusations of being sponsors of M23. What's in it for them?
A lot of natural resources. Of course, Paul Kagame has always denied sponsoring any militia groups in Congo or any violence in Congo. But nonetheless, your viewers would remember, if I can take you as back as 1999, when Paul Kagame's army and the army of Yoweri Museveni of Uganda actually fought in the city of Kisangani over diamond mines, killing over 250 Congolese people and leaving over 1,000 people injured. And I can name hundreds of similar situations in which Kagame's army and Museveni's army are killing Congolese people in order to gain access and control of natural resources. So that is their central objectives, one of their central objectives. In my opinion, actually, I think Kagame has a larger goal. I think Kagame is wishing to extend its Tutsi power from Kigali all the way to section of Eastern Congo. Kagame wants a small, if you like, Tutsi republic in Eastern Congo. And this is my view why Kagame continues to sponsor violence and instability in Congo.
Thank you, Vava. I'd like to bring in Jordan also from the United Kingdom. Now, Jordan, we've heard the accusations. Vava is not the first person that will be making this accusation. The United States Foreign Relations Committee Senator Menendez, in a statement just a few weeks ago, said he's calling on Rwanda to halt its support for M23 rebels in the eastern DRC responsible for killing Congolese citizens. It says, the M23 and its backers merit international condemnation and must be held accountable. So the ranking Senator Menendez, U.S. Foreign Relations Committee, has said it. Just a few months ago, the United Nations came up with a report saying that they have solid evidence that Rwanda is sponsoring M23. And if you also recall the United Nations mapping report in 2010, it did say that Rwanda is responsible for, theft and disruptions and, sponsoring M23 rebels in the Congo. So what's Rwanda's role in this conflict, and why has Rwanda not been held responsible? Because they can deny all you want, but the facts speak for themselves.
Well, if we go back to the 2012-2013 era of the M23 rebellion, when they actually briefly occupied Goma, so this is the city that's the capital of North Kivu province, for a number of days. We did see once again, we saw the United Nations similarly making these allegations. Quite a lot of substantiation was provided, and we saw a response as well, especially from the United States government. And at that point, the United States government took a certain amount of action against Rwanda. We saw the U.S. purse strings in terms of its donor assistance being tightened somewhat. And the U.S. government was relatively clear that they said this was in response to Rwandan support for the M23. And it was subsequent to that we really saw the tide turning against M23. And obviously, this is not the only factor that's relevant. There was also the intervention of the Force Intervention Brigade by the United Nations, so a special force with an offensive mandate against the M23 that was brought in as well. But the combination of those two things then very much saw M23 being rolled back during that period. Now, it's not just a question of this year that we've seen M23 making a comeback. Actually, this return has been coming slowly over a number of years, but it's very much accelerated during 2022. But we could even see early indications of it growing up during late 2021. So there are a number of these factors that are behind it. And even when we think outside of Rwanda, one of the things we now also have to bear in mind with M23 is they've taken a substantial amount of territory within North Kivu. And the more that they are in possession of areas such as the border post with Uganda, the more if they push into Masisi territory and they're able to take direct control over mining areas or over access to roads on which minerals move, they're going to start to increasingly have independent revenue streams. Which are going to make them less dependent on any sponsors. It's been observed that it's quite easy for a sponsor to create an armed group in the Democratic Republic of Congo, but it becomes increasingly difficult with time to maintain control over it. And therefore, the longer M23 remains in place and the longer it has access to independent revenue streams, the more it is going to be able to act as well on its own demands. They get to make these demands of the Congolese government to ask for integration into the Congolese military, and specifically for that to happen and for the resettlement of refugees in North Kivu, which is one of the things that the Congolese government the Congolese government hasn't been keen to do, precisely because they fear that the integration of M23 in North Kivu would precisely then be essentially a fifth column or a disloyal element right on its own border, which they wouldn't want to be in place.
Thank you, Jordan. I'd like to follow up with Vava. Vava, why do you think the Rwandan government has been allowed to carry on sponsoring M23 and meddling in the domestic affairs of Congo, disrupting the Democratic Republic of Congo with impunity? Because the hard evidence is there, but the British are still in business with the Rwandan government. The Americans just releasing statements. The French friends with Rwanda because Rwandan troops are helping them with the Total gas project in Cabo Delgado. What else could you say is responsible for the international community's refusal to hold the Kigali government responsible?
Well, there is one element which we have to correct. Jordan talked about allegations. These are not allegations. These are facts. When UN investigators produce a report with evidence, they are no longer allegations. They were being treated as allegations when the Congolese government and Congolese activists like myself were screaming to the world that Kagame is again fueling and funding the killings of our people. When the UN produces report that backs it up, it's no longer allegation, they become fact. Now, clearly, it's been clearly established that without support, without the guns, without troops reinforcement from Kigali, the M23 could not kill, displace the Congolese people to the extent they have done, let's say, simply for the last couple of months. Similarly, it's also clear that without guns and funds from the UK, from the US, from the EU, including the French and the Belgium and the Germans, without those money and those guns, Kigali, Paul Kagame, could not have continued to fuel and violence and killings and displacement in Congo to the extent it has done since 1998. We are talking about over 5.4 million Congolese people killed. We are also talking about over 5.6 million Congolese people displaced. And as a consequence of all this violence, now we find ourselves in a country with around 26 million Congolese people, or 1 in 4, facing starvation. Now, I am not saying at all that Kagame is the sole responsible, but he is definitely one of the architects of this crisis, of this tragedy.
Vava, sorry to interrupt you, because just a few years ago, the International Court of Justice did order Uganda to pay reparations for its activities as disrupted activities in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Why wasn't this extended to Rwanda?
But when the Congolese government at the time, under the leadership of Laurent Kabila, actually lodged the legal challenge at the International Court of Justice, under the UN against Kigali and Kampala. However, because of pressure, the legal challenge against Kigali was essentially withdrawn by the Congolese government at the time, under the impression that the international community would stop Rwanda from killing people in Congo, from fueling violence in Congo. That has not happened. This is the reason we have been pushing for the creation of an international criminal tribunal for Congo, so that we can hold those responsible for the killings of our people accountable, but also because we understand that peace begins with justice. But there is another argument, another element which we need to discuss. We are asking ourselves why the UK remains silent when Rwanda continues to kill people in Congo. Why the US continue to send aid to Kigali when Kigali is fueling and funding militia gangs in Congo, even when US senators have made it clear that this is unacceptable. Why the EU just today has decided to give Rwanda 20 million, not just Rwanda in fact, to give the Rwandan army 20 million euros, when that exact army has been killing people in Congo, displacing people in Congo. For me, I suppose the answer is quite clear. We need to be brave and to actually say that here we find ourselves in an incredibly neo-colonial issue in which the British, the American, the European are fueling instability at the heart of Africa. So long as Congo remains on its knee, so long as Congo remains how it is at the moment, then the whole Africa cannot potentially develop and take off, because Congo finds itself at the heart of the continent, the only country with so much natural resources, the only country with the capacity not just to feed the whole Africa, but also to give light to the entire continent. If without Congo functioning, stability or prosperity in the south cannot be connected to prosperity in the north. Similarly, prosperity in the east cannot be connected to prosperity in the west, because Congo finds itself right at the heart of the continent. So in a nutshell, here, my opinion has become that the US, the British and the European are fueling violence in Congo as a way of keeping Africa on its knee, because Africa, it's been said, will become what Congo becomes. If Congo remains on its knee, the entire continent, its force, essentially to remain on its knee for decades to come. And if Congo takes off with all of its potential, all of its creativity, all of its energy and culture, the entire Africa will change and become prosperous.
Thank you very much, Vava. I'd like to bring in our third guest into this conversation, Chief Bisong Tahoben. As a journalist, he joins us from Limbe in Cameroon. A very warm welcome to you, Chief, and thanks for joining us on Secure the Continent. Hello, Chief Bisong, are you there?
Yeah. Great,
okay.
I'm getting you now.
Thank you very much, Chief. Welcome to the program. The M23 rebels who are not represented at the ongoing inter-Congolese dialogue in Nairobi and are currently under sanctions by the Democratic Republic of Congo have been asked to hand themselves over to the government, and failure to do so, military action will be taken against them. What are the implications of this? And one of our panelists, Jordan, did confirm that some fighting has taken place, the exchanges between government forces and M23. Does it mean that negotiations are effectively off the table?
Well, I don't think so. The problem here is that most of the people who are connected, who are concerned with these negotiations, especially on the side of the rebels, the M23, the people who seem to be talking, like their spokesman who made a statement yesterday and early this morning, doesn't seem to have the authority to really come out and say certain things. It seems as if he has to wait to be given instructions, say this, say that. And so
there's no clear
and the power to take.
There's no clear means of communication.
And power well, there is, but those who are fighting on the ground now, they are not the real decision makers concerning the talks. They are not the real decision makers concerning what is going on. So on the one hand, I don't want to really accuse people here, but it is almost certain. Investigations have proved that the M23 is made up mostly of Rwandan armed force, soldiers of the Rwandan armed forces. And the people who say we are M23, they don't really have the powers to affect anything.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief Bisong. It's a fine place to go on a break. You're watching Secure the Continent on New Central Television. We've been discussing the current security situation in the eastern DRC, where negotiations are currently happening in Nairobi, Kenya, to find a lasting solution to the violence in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. When we come back, we'll be looking at solutions and the effect of this conflict on the people living in the Eastern DRC. Do stay with us. It's Secure the Continent. Welcome back to Secure the Continent, New Central Television, and we've been discussing the security situation in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. I still have here with me Vava Tampa, founder of the Save the Congo group. He joins in from London in the United Kingdom, and also Jordan Anderson, a senior risk analyst with S&P Global. I also have Chief Bisong Etahoben, journalist who joins in from Limbe in Cameroon. Now I'd like to come to you, Vava. Now, Vava, Just a few days ago, or less than 24 hours ago, Rwandan President Paul Kagame was in Parliament and he gave an impassioned speech. He spoke about the Democratic Republic of Congo for 43 minutes. He accused DRC President Felix Tshisekedi of exploiting the ongoing insecurity in the eastern DRC to postpone next year's presidential elections. How do you react to this? And also, President Paul Kagame sent his foreign minister, Vincent Biruta, to the talks in Nairobi, and he wasn't there personally. Do you read any meaning to it, or or it's not much of a big deal that he was absent in these talks? What's your take on all of this?
Well, this is Paul Kagame in panic mode. He spent a whole 43 minutes on a subject he claims to have nothing to do with. Clearly, his plan to force the M23 to be integrated into the Congolese army has failed. This has been Kagame's plan from the very beginning, from 1998. Paul Kagame's plan has always been to use the Tutsi people who suffered a terrible genocide at the hands of the Hutu genocide in Rwanda, and we welcome them into Congo as refugees, and I hate using the word refugees when I'm addressing our fellow human beings, particularly African people, but we welcome both the Hutus and the Tutsis when they were fleeing violence in Rwanda into the DRC. We fed and housed them, provided educations and everything else we could potentially provide under the circumstances. And Kagame, in spite of all of that goodness, that the Congolese nation has always have its door open for the Rwandan people, we have always treated them as brothers and sisters, have decided from 1998 to use the Tutsi people as his, if you like, his argument of fueling violence in Congo, using the genocide in 1994 as an excuse. And partially because of the guilt of the 1994 genocide, some of the European powers have kept quiet, have not acted. So his argument, his strategy has always been to use the Tutsi as a way of sort of claiming, the Tutsis are fighting to protect the interests of the Tutsis, when Kagame himself is actually the one person who has been more murderous to the Tutsi than the genocide there. To then push the Tutsi and some of those from Rwanda to be integrated into the Congolese army. Now that he has failed, he has been finding himself feeling frustrated, and he's speaking about election or democracy. Well, at the very least, in Congo, we have a free and fair, or a version of free and fair election. In Kigali, in Rwanda, there is no such thing. Kagame himself wins election in this with the same sort of marks or point as Saddam Hussein in Iraq at 96 or 98%. Every single opponent.
Now, Vava, are you saying that President Felix Tshisekedi is not in any way trying to postpone elections in the Congo next year?
No, what I'm saying is, even if it had been the case that Felix Tshisekedi was trying to postpone, to use this as an argument to postpone the election, Kagame has nothing to say on this. Kagame has no education or something to say on election or democracy. Before he speaks on election or human rights or freedom of expression, he should first free people like overseas Bagina and allow free and fair election to take place in Rwanda. In terms of the Congolese people, we will deal with Felix Tshisekedi if he attempted to change the constitution or to stay in power. In the same way, if you look across the region, Kagame has changed the constitution to stay in power, so has Museveni, so has other leaders in the region. The only country where the people, the Congolese people, forced their president, who hanged on to power, attempting to change the constitution, who forced him to step down, was in Congo. So Kagame has no argument to advance. Nothing to teach the Congolese people on election. He should be quiet, and he should stop sending his bandits into Congo. And like or not, one way or the other, he will be held accountable for the killings in Congo, and he would face justice in Congo. in a Congolese court.
Thank you, Vava. I'd like to bring in Jordan. Jordan, this is your turf, your senior risk analyst. Now, the members of the East African Community States have deployed troops to the region. People say, this is a very volatile region with armed groups all over the place and competing geopolitical and regional interests. So wouldn't this aggravate the situation in an already volatile region?
So we have to remember that a number of the troops who are talked about who are going to participate in the East African military mission are already present in Congo, especially when we're thinking about Ugandan and Burundian troops. They're present in different parts of the East. So we're thinking more of in Ituri and South Kivu as well. But that's where these forces are. Now, the presence of Kenyan troops coming in who've already deployed into Goma, that's likely acting as another inhibition against M23, feeling like they can come right down into the city. I'm not saying that's the only factor, certainly. But again, the presence of a number of well-trained, quite well-equipped Kenyan troops around Goma is going to act as a protective force there. This is likely to be one of the complicating geopolitical issues from the perspective of the Rwandan government. Is they see that there are a number of other East African states deploying their troops into Eastern Congo in an area in which, again, as we've seen historically, the Rwandan government feels like it has security and economic interests in that area. And then it's always been made quite clear that the Rwandan military is not going to be invited to take part in the East African Force mission into Eastern DRC, despite Rwanda, and as well as the DRC now both being members of the East African community. Mm-hmm. And there's a number of elements of
what's the reason for the exemption of Rwandan Defense Forces troops in this EAC arrangement?
Quite simply because the Congolese government says they won't accept them. The Congolese is the sovereign entity for its state, and it says it won't accept a Rwandan participation in that mission. And therefore, Rwandan troops can't be included without their agreement. It is worth bearing in mind that the statements that we've seen coming out by Kagame about Tshisekedi and the DRC's next elections are very, very striking in terms of the vehemence behind some of these remarks. And it's worth bearing in mind that there has not always been such a bad relationship between Kagame and Tshisekedi. If we were to go back a little over a year or 2 years, we saw much more cooperation between them. Indeed, we saw a number of allegations since Tshisekedi came to power, but again, before this time last year, that the Rwandan military was being deployed into Eastern Congo, and along with the Congolese military, that they were together targeting Rwandan armed opposition groups in North Kivu. Now, the Congolese government denied that was happening, the Rwandan government denied that was happening, but a number of local journalists and communities on the ground alleged that it was going on. So it seems that we've moved a very long way from that kind of situation where that kind of collaboration was at least allegedly possible to one where we now have essentially Kagame making remarks that challenge the very legitimacy of Tshisekedi continuing in power in DRC.
Thank you, Jordan. Chief Tahoben, the EAC leaders authorized the use of force against the M23 rebels if they do not observe a ceasefire and withdraw from positions they're currently occupying in Eastern DRC. Are there non-military and lethal solutions to dealing with the M23 problems? Because, there were CNDP before M23, and the name M23 came as a result of the failure of the government to honor the March 23 agreement. So you've tried negotiations, you've tried, the United Nations troops alongside Congolese forces, drove them the last time they were close to Goma. So are there non-military means to address this issue, Chief?
You see, the problem in the Eastern DRC, especially the resurgence of the M23, has much to do with the presence of former Hutu soldiers who were involved in the 1994 genocide in Rwanda. And as long as Rwanda feels that these people who it accuses of having carried out the genocide, and it feels that these people are still in the Eastern DRC, and he feels threatened that they can regroup in one way or the other and come and attack him And he continues to feel that because there are most of the opposition voices coming, the opposition against the Rwandan government comes from the former Hutu soldiers who are hiding in the eastern DRC. As long as Kagame feels that these people are there and he feels threatened, whatever negotiations that are being carried on, whatever thing that is going on, is bound to fail, because Kagame is a very persistent somebody. He will not accept anything until he will not even contribute to bringing about peace until he is satisfied that he is safe. His power, his government, he will remain in power as long as he wants, and he will not accept any threat from former Hutu fighters, former Hutu soldiers.
Okay, thank you.
That is the
Chief.
problem.
Thank you, Chief. I saw Vava reacting there. You were nodding your head in disagreement, and I'd like you to comment. Chief Bisong seems to suggest that, because of the presence of FDLR troops in the Congo and former Interahamwe militia, that, perhaps President Kagame is right to do what he's doing. And also, quickly before we wrap up this conversation, people were wondering, where's the United Nations in all of this? Congolese citizens have been questioning why MONUSCO, despite a budget of more than $1.1 billion and a mandate to protect the population, more than 120 armed groups to roam the region, causing debt, displacement, and dire humanitarian crisis. So what has MONUSCO been doing about this M23 rebel incursion? As fast as you can, please. Thanks.
Well, I think Chief Bisong is clearly ill-informed. He's speaking about a subject he doesn't clearly well understand, or he has not well studied. There is no such thing as an FDLR threat against Kigali or against Kampala or against any government. If the FDLR are any problem at all, they are in fact a problem for the Congolese people. They have been causing harm and mayhem in Congo. They haven't caused any serious threat to Kigali for many years. And God knows, and this is again just to explain how Chief Bisong is ill-informed, how many armed military operation the Congolese government, the Congolese army, has actually done jointly with Rwanda in the aim of essentially clearing the issue of the map of the earth, if you like, to address the whole entirety of the FDLR issues, dozens of those. It's really well researched and investigated and documented that Rwanda or Kagame sending troops in Congo, it's nothing to do with FDLR. A simple example is the M23, since they started their killing campaign in November last year, how many times the M23 have attacked or arrested or stopped or killed any FDLR leader? None, not a single one. But I can tell you how many Congolese people they have displaced. Nearly 400,000 Congolese people have been displaced.
Now quickly on the subject of MONUSCO, Vava, before we wrap things up. Yes.
So this is another argument which we are saying, that we do not want the UN troops, or in fact, to be absolutely frank, even the Kenyan or Burundian or East African troops in Congo. We want all of them to leave Congo. MONUSCO forces have been absolutely useless. They have not stopped the M23 from killing the Congolese people, from displacing the Congolese people. In fact, the MONUSCO forces have been withdrawing from strategic areas to allow M23 to advance. And this is incredibly disappointed. What we are asking, what every Congolese person is asking is for the UN to send more UN lawyers, even more African Union lawyers, not UN or AU or East African or SADC troops. We want lawyers to deal with the impunity which is fueling people like Kagame and the M23 and other militia gangs like the M23 in Congo, and to address the impunity, because peace begins with justice. So until we have the creation of an international criminal tribunal for Congo, with UN lawyers, with African Union lawyers, to address the culture of impunity at the heart of these issues, nothing would work. That is the answer to the crisis.
Thank you, Vava. Jordan Anderson, Vava suggests that no peace without justice, and crimes have taken place and people need to be held accountable for their deeds. Now, we have a series of talks that have been happening in Angola and also in Nairobi. Are you hopeful, as we wrap up this conversation, that these series of meetings will bear fruits and bring about a lasting solution to the recurrent conflict in the eastern DRC?
Hopeful, but sadly I'd say I'm not optimistic about this. As we've noted, there have been a number of previous rounds with the precursors of M23, with the RCD Goma, with the CNDP, and again, even with M23's previous incarnation. And we've seen recurring bouts of conflict coming from this. And there are a number of different claims of victimhood here as well. If we go all the way back to the years when we had Mobutu as president of then Zaire, there were a number of claims by ethnic Rwandophones living in Eastern Congo that they were being subject to denials of their claims to Congolese citizenship, to Congolese nationality. And that actually helped to fuel previous incarnations of rebellions where we saw Rwandophones in Eastern Congo being involved in violence against the Congolese government. So there are a number of these different claims here, and it's very hard to see how they're all going to be successfully or quickly resolved. But in particular, there will likely continue to need to be a security mission with international assistance in Eastern Congo, simply to deal with groups like M23, which currently are showing they are relatively well armed and capable of challenging the Congolese military.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. A fine place to live it. It's definitely a conversation that will be ongoing, and I look forward to discussing this in the nearest future. And hopefully these talks end the long suffering of the people in the eastern DRC. Thank you very much, Vava Tampa, Jordan Anderson, and Chibisong Etap Hoben for joining me today on Secure the Continent. Thank you. President Tshisekedi should redouble efforts to balance the competing interests of his neighbors, clearly delineate what Uganda's operations will do, and convince Rwanda to commit to regional diplomacy rather than renewed warfare. Foreign military operations could generate further proxy conflicts in the region, so long torn apart by outside meddling, it can ill afford another war involving DRC's neighbors. Thank you very much for staying with me today on Secure the Continent. See you next time. I'm Gbenga Aborowa. Bye-bye.